This episode is brought to you by Kiko Socks. With a pair of Kikos, you'll have an experience that keeps you focused on your performance and not your feet. Use our coupon code POD15 for 15% off your order at kikosocks.com.
I hope you guys enjoyed the pod. Be sure to follow us on Instagram or YouTube at podpractice_pod. Email us at show@podpracticepod or listen on Spotify at podpractice.
On this episode, we talk about mental health in sports. A quick warning that we do discuss suicide and self-harm. If you or a loved one is experiencing anything similar, please seek the guidance of a professional. Welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about mental health in sports with Ari Nelson. Ari played the last 3 seasons with Molly Brown and will be playing with Mile High Trash this year. Ari has always been an advocate for mental health awareness in ultimate in sports and in general. And they are now pursuing their EDS in school psychology. Ari also deadlifts as much as I do and is an all-around badass. Ari, welcome to the show.
Sick. Thanks for having me. I didn't know that. That's a good fun fact.
It's got to be close. All right. So at some point during the pod today, I'd love to hear from the whole group about our personal experiences with mental health. But first, thought it'd be good to give our listeners a little bit more background on you, Ari. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational and professional background and why is mental health awareness so important to you?
Yeah, for sure. Wow, that's a really big question. So I guess kind of big picture, I am professionally pursuing kind of a job within the mental health field because I have lived through it for a large portion of my life. We look at I don't know if any of you took stat when you were in high school or college, but if you look at a normal curve distribution of where the normal population is and, bottom 5%, top 5%, I fall within the top 10% of people with living with mental illnesses. And I was first diagnosed when I was 10. So at this point, it's more than half my life that I've been aware of this. And I mean, long story short, I just I truly don't think that sports, schools, our society, etc., is set up to help people like me, and set up to create opportunities for them to thrive. And I think a lot of the ways in which we push expectations onto people is really limiting the mentally ill population. And obviously my journey started when I was in grade school. And so kind of as I grew up and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I realized that I really wanted to focus my energy back on that age group. So yeah, I went to college and thought I was actually going to be pre-med for some dumb reason, and then took Chem 101 and was absolutely not. And and then took Psych 101 and realized that was really where I wanted to be, and kind of, whittled down a lot of stuff. And now I'm here and I love what I do. And I'm really open and excited to talk about it in a lot of different ways.
As someone who deals with mental health on a daily basis in your life, do you find that it mostly helps? Does it make your job, what you're pursuing, more fulfilling? And does it present any challenges that, you may not otherwise have?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like anything else, right? Like my day to day looks a lot different than other people's day to day. My ability to get up and go to work on some days is like so limited. And unfortunately, schools need mental health professionals. And so, like, I'm expected to be at school every day. Like, taking a day off is really hard. And that being said, like, I'm sure that you all have interacted with grade school, middle school kids, like they can smell bullshit on people, and so like it's a great way for me to connect with them because they can tell that I know kind of a little bit like my ability to empathize with them is a lot greater than a lot of mental health professionals because I've done it. And so like I find that a lot of the feedback I get from supervisors and kids and families is like,
because you understand
this kid really connected with you, and that's really cool. Totally. And so yeah, so in that sense I would say like definitely makes things very, very fulfilling for me to recognize that like this kid sees an adult who is functioning and in grad school and is like, oh my god, they're like me and like I can do that.
What are some misconceptions around mental health in sports, do you think? And can you speak to maybe some of your personal experience around that, especially in a team setting? Or maybe even like maybe not misconceptions, but how would you describe the perspective of the person who has those daily struggles or weekly struggles or how whatever the cadence is, and what is the other side potentially missing when interacting with people like that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Can I counter your question with a question? I guess before I answer this, like Mikey, you and I like met a week and a half ago and we talked, and Quinn, you and I have talked like substantially about this in different moments of our friendship. I guess like why do you all play frisbee? Like if you were to like think about like if you were to put why you love frisbee so much into like a 30-second
yeah, let's all answer. Who wants to go first?
Like what would you say?
I can go. I think first off, because I find it very enjoyable, but I think on a more in-depth level, I find it very fulfilling, and to pursue to be the player I think I can be, and just pursue greatness in something that I find fulfilling and I find fun. Yeah.
Kinsey, you want to go?
Yeah, I feel like my answer changes a lot like as I get older. And I think a lot of the reasons aren't even necessarily like I'm not necessarily like aware of them. I think there's a lot of like subconscious reasons as to why I play. But I think like I think like an obvious one that a lot of people talk about is like just having, and that I've become more aware of recently, is just having a community that you're a part of, especially the more I interact with people maybe who don't play on like a sports team or whatever the community is. Honestly, just any type of like group that you gather with like on a regular basis is kind of cool to have. And then there's like part of it that's like kind of like Quinn touched on, like a pursuit, just like in a lot of ways. And I honestly sometimes I feel more motivated by it than other times, but like just pursuing something is very fulfilling because it's like sometimes when you lose sight of like what you're doing, that can be like a lonely feeling. So give something to like chase after, and having a purpose that you're like working towards every day can be really nice to like aim your life at. And then I think there's other reasons that I don't necessarily like, that are probably more like, I don't know, ego driven or subconscious. And I honestly like, I think I realized that more and more with like a lot of things is like, I don't necessarily like a lot of things I do. If you asked me why sometimes I'll have a good answer and it maybe is right, and a lot of other times I'm like, wow, I would probably fail if I really tried to put it in words for you.
I think
Totally.
because Ari, you and I spoke earlier, so I kind of I think I know where you're going with this, but I'll still answer it the same way. And originally it was just because it was fun, and then I got pretty good at it, and then it sort of very much aligns with what both of them were saying. The more I did it, the more fulfilling it became, and the more I realized that I really liked building a team and being part of a team and being part of a community. I think there are also some other reasons like FOMO at this point. I might just yeah, like I just can't quit.
Yeah, FOMO too.
And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, word. So I guess I asked that because I think recently I've become like more and more aware of like why I play Frisbee. And I think that, like, to answer your previous question, Mikey, like what are some misconceptions or like what do you go through? Like, I'm 24, almost 25. I've been playing for, I don't know, around the 10-year mark. And like my journey through Frisbee has been so tough. It's been so hard. And so like when I look back on it, I'm like, God, why do I do this? Like, why am I doing this? Like, this is not, I've had so many bad experiences within this community. Like, why is this something that I choose to put myself through? And the true answer that I've come to now, and I'm sure it's going to change, right? Like, I'm so young, I have a lot more years to play, is like, statistically, I should not be alive. And then even farther than that, statistically, even like with the fact that I am alive, I should be institutionalized, in jail, hospitalized. Like I should not be functioning at the level that I function at. And that really like came to fruition for me when I was in like starting my grad school classes and like finding out, you know, kind of like how prevalent is mental illness actually in our world, and like what are we actually dealing with in terms of numbers, and you know, when you look at different diagnoses, like what are the projected paths of people who are really mentally ill? And like I should not be able to play Frisbee at the level I play at, and I do, and I'm fucking good at it. And so like for me now, why I play Frisbee is a little bit less about me, and it's more about showing other people that are like me that they can also do stuff. Because like when I, you know, like when I was a part of Molly Brown and we won a championship, like the first thing that happened to me is all of these people that I've made connections with throughout my time in the Frisbee community who are also pretty mentally ill or struggle with trauma or whatever, and like those connections have grown over years. Those were the people who, when they reached out to me and they were like, yo, you are an inspiration. Like what you just did is incredible. Yeah. That's why I play Frisbee. Because if I go through my own journey in the Frisbee community, I don't want to play Frisbee.
It does
I don't,
present so much strife for you so often. Totally. And so I guess like, so that didn't really answer your question, but I guess a huge misconception is just like people have no idea how hard it is for some people to access the sport on a day-to-day, the smallest level, how hard it is to get up and go to practice, how hard it is to pay for tournaments when you're also paying for therapy and meds and hospitalization, how hard it is to do it. You know, people have no clue. And so I think that that's the biggest misconception, is I'm just like, you see me show up to practice and perform. You see me getting on the biggest stage in a national championship game and perform. And you have no idea the like steps that it takes to get there and how different those steps look from the general population. When we talked a couple of weeks ago, I'm trying to look back at some of my notes here, and you mentioned a lot about like what your perspective of a practice is, and some days where like other people may think that you're struggling when you're not, or
Yeah.
um, in an instance where you are feeling totally fine, somebody may just completely like have a completely incorrect read on you, and that and then like what I from the there becomes a disconnect because one side may be like apprehensive or whatever, or overly sensitive when they don't need to be. Am I saying this sort of correctly?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, I think what you're trying to get at is you and I had talked about kind of like
Uh-huh.
conflict and like what does conflict mean, right? And like where does conflict kind of happen? And Kins,
It
I'm gonna
happens a
blast you for a
lot.
second,
Don't
but like
worry.
when
Just
I,
kind of
like
used
when
to
I
it at
think
this
about
point.
Kins, like when I think about Kins and when I think about like watching Kins at practice or on the field or against another team, I'm like, damn, like that kid doesn't give a flying shit what people think of him. And like he's able to perform in this like in this like high stress, and like the way that he expresses himself is like so it's different than how other people express themselves. I think we can all kind of
I'm nodding
agree on
yes.
that,
I'm nodding.
and it's one of the reasons why I adore you, Kim. So I'm not, yeah. So I'm
Oh, it's
not,
all been
this
great
isn't
so
intended
far.
to like, crap on you. And I think, okay, great. And I think that like where we get into trouble is when you put someone like Kins or like me, different people, totally different perspectives on the sport, totally different understandings of conflict, but and like present similarly on the field, like loud, assertive, aggressive, boisterous, like that, that type of thing. And you put them in a situation where they're expected not to do that.
Right.
Like they're expected not to be that way. And then you add in other people who are like, not only are you expected not to be that way, but the way that you do that made me so uncomfortable that I'm like, it feels attacking to me, right? And I think that happens more in women's frisbee also than in men's, which is like a whole other thing, is like the gendered aspect of it, right? And when I think about my experience being at practice or on a field and having those moments of like acute conflict where maybe I say something too loud, or maybe I make a face that someone doesn't like, or maybe I just disagree with someone, right? And like the way that I exist is already so uncomfortable so much of the time that moment of conflict doesn't
Right.
faze me. It doesn't faze me because I'm like, whatever. Like I'm used to having some sort of strife. And when you add in gender, privilege, white womanhood, right? Like all the things that happen on a frisbee field, specifically on the women's field, like you get people who are like,
Yeah.
I don't jive with that.
Yeah.
Because they don't live in discomfort.
Like,
and so when they feel discomfort, they're like,
it's
nope,
like
closing my
the
doors.
immediate need to completely separate from the situation. We talked about this quite a bit the other week about how so many of us are so scared of conflict and being uncomfortable that we would rather cut somebody out of our lives rather than having a conversation with them. And I will say, I've had some of those thoughts about you, Atkins, and Ari, your partner, Becky, Eric, we call him Becky. He and I have had many conflicts over our coach player relationship in the last 8 years or whatever. And, at the same time though, like I and it's sometimes really hard, but overall, I'm thankful that we've had a lot of conversations. There have been huge ebbs and flows in my relationship with a lot of players and with Eric. There have been times when like I'm glad that I don't have to deal with him this season because I'm on a different team. But I'm also like I feel like we're in a really good spot now. For partially because Quinn put me in a situation of, hey, will you coach Bravo? And so like I'm back with Eric, but like I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity to sort of rekindle that relationship because it is good. And now you and Eric live 5 minutes away from me, so I can see you all the time.
You see us a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I could get on a step stool and talk about how fearful people are of conflict and how harmful it is that people shy away from conflict for hours. I could talk
on
about
the topic of Atkins, so and so you have well I'm curious, like,
yeah, let's bring it back to him.
How do we like? Is there an appropriate way to identify mental health issues, or like what's it like? How do you know? Like, is Kins just different than me?
I mean,
or
that is certainly true.
like, well, like, I mean, that is certainly true. But like, I have myself have dealt with mental health issues in a much different way. But I'm trying to like put this together. Like, when I see Atkins get really upset, like, we're 0-3 in our last 3 AUDL games. Like I see Kins kind of about to rip his shirt open or like punch the ground and be really upset. Like, and I don't want to turn this into a therapy session unless we want to do that. But how do we like? Is that like?
I don't.
Is that just a way to express your anger? And maybe this is and so like
absolutely.
Is there any reason? At what point do you say like, okay, that's an unhealthy way to express your anger?
What do you define unhealthy? And like, whose job is
I have no idea.
Yeah, just like how it affects each person, like, because
totally. And totally. And honestly, like, something that I think about frequently is like Lisa, who you had on the podcast last week or a couple weeks ago. Lisa and I see things very similarly. We like, when we talk about things, we frequently get into these like, really intense conversations where we're like, yeah, totally. And then the other person will say something and we're like, yeah. And like, we see eye to eye on things, right? And one of the things that we definitely see eye to eye on is that we adore the way that kids interact with Sophie. We adore it. And we're like, probably, especially within the women's game, like we're probably in the minority there. And I think like, to speak to your point, like, Kins, have you ever played on like in a game or on the field and physically been like, I need to remove myself from this?
Almost like, I don't know. There have been times where I want to like, walk away. I feel like yes, but it's not. I don't know. I'm not really. Maybe not. I don't think about leaving frequently. I've definitely gotten to points where I just wanted to like, I'll walk away, I guess, like farther away, so I like don't have to interact with people for a little bit.
Yeah.
But I'm never like, God, I wish I could just like leave where I am right now.
Word. Yeah, I think that this is so not easy to say. And but I think that like
I
the
would
Frisbee
agree.
community is pretty soft.
Yeah. You won't find any disagreement here.
Okay. Okay, yeah. And I think when I like the reason that I think that is because like why do people like Kins kill people so fast? Like, you know, like I'm like, what is it about, or like me or Becky, like what is it about us that just like tilts you so fast? Like why can you not disconnect from whatever we're going through and like expressing in a way that like is okay for you so that you can continue and perform, right? Like I've never hurt anyone. I've never outwardly like verbally attacked a teammate. I don't know if I can say the same for Becky or Kins or whatever, but like when I think about like healthy ways, right? Like my healthy way
Right.
of
That
expressing
actually is a
is
good point.
expressing, period.
I was thinking about
Like if I,
my
right?
differences from like Kins, for instance, which could be considered unhealthy as well. Like I will just bottle shit up. I'll be like really fucking pissed at somebody. Sometimes I'll yell at them, but a lot of times I'm just like bottling it up and be like, I'll deal with it later. I'll just get stressed out. Or poor TK will send me one message on Slack and I'll just freak out for 30 minutes. It just happened.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like you were saying earlier, who gets to define what is healthy and unhealthy, and
yeah, totally. Who gets to decide? And it's always the people who complain about me or about Kins or about Becky are almost always the people that are like, I would rather not have any conflict. I would rather practice stay completely positive. And I would rather this person just shut their mouth, truly. And at that point, you're just upholding one person's experience of Frisbee over another. And like, why are we doing that? Like, why are we doing that? Why are we protecting a group that's probably already super protected with privilege by like saying, yeah, you're right. Like this person's way of interacting with this space and this sport is making you uncomfortable. And we're not going to tell you to grow your resilience. We're just going to get rid of that person. Or tell them that they need to be quiet or that they need to fix themselves or whatever, right? Like, yeah, like when Becky and I talk about Frisbee, we've had so many of the same conversations, he and I, so many with teammates, with coaches, with captains, like, you're too negative, you show too much anger, you disagree with people too much, you know, all of those things. And I'm like, yeah, I'm human. We're human. We're human beings. And like,
yeah,
what do you want from us?
Quinn, I actually,
you know?
I have one thought that I want to come back to on this, like the perspective of the coach and team. So don't let me forget. But Quinn, I do want to ask you about, you know, the years that you've played with Becky. I know we weren't planning to talk about Bex at all, but you know, like I think you've always had a more positive interaction with him than I think other teammates. And do you have any sense of why that is? Also, I should say, Becky's an amazing teammate. Becky's an amazing player. He's an amazing
He's
person.
an incredible person.
Anyway.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, I mean, so I started playing with Becky
person.
my freshman year of college. And I never really understood why people had so many like qualms with him or issues with him, because I always just got along with him. And I always just understood that like we're being competitive, we're playing a sport, and the way he reacts to stuff is normal. Like I want to react to stuff like that all the time, but you know, just who I am. Sometimes I don't, sometimes I do. It's just like I just always saw it as normal, and I think that really helped. And maybe growing up playing hockey with a bunch of like overly masculine, hyper masculine people, like maybe primed me for that in sports. And yeah, I never saw the way he reacted to things or the way he handled things as an issue for me. And I've always had a very good relationship with Becky, and I've always really enjoyed him as a teammate. I don't know if I have a specific reason why. It's just kind of how I am and how I have kind of experienced my relationship with him, and it's always been very pleasant, and I've always really enjoyed being a teammate with him.
And generally, I would say when he is most upset, it's usually about something, inward, like he's not performing the way he wants to, and then then his tone may change relative to any conversation, but it's really because he's upset at himself usually. What I wanted to come back to is what you're talking about, like, we're all human, and we need to let people express themselves the way that is true to themselves. I think that's the number one thing I've honestly learned from coaching Atkins. Like some people will text me. I've told you this, Atkins. Like, hey, what's up with that? What's up with this kid's guy? Like is he out of
Seems to be
control or
the
what?
normal
And like,
text.
it's not that often. It's not that often, but it has happened. And over the years, like, I've realized as best as I can that, like, I can't expect Atkins to score and then react to the score the way that I would, or like if somebody fouls him or whatever, like I can't expect that. And if I were to box him in, I feel like it would limit his, like, it's not true to himself. So how could I expect him to play freely and to his
Yeah.
potential? On the other hand, though, like, as someone who is like, I am very team focused, and a lot of like what we talk about on the pod is culture, team culture. A lot of when I've had the most success is when the culture is great. And for that reason, I'm sure, I'm more than positive that I'm guilty of, like, hey, you need to act a certain way. You need to, like, we always say, like, only worry about what you can control. And like, I think those are true and valuable, but there's that fine line, and I don't know how to walk it all the time, of like, this is what's best for the team, but also this is what's best for you. Ultimately, like, what's best for the team is probably what's best for you, but but it may not always perfectly align, and figuring out how to balance those two from my job as a coach has been challenging, I will say. I don't think there's a right answer, though.
Yeah. I mean, also when you look at the demographic of Frisbee and like who makes up Frisbee, like when you're like, what's right for the team, it's typically what's right for like a dominant majority privileged group. Right. And so it's also like when you and I spoke, Mikey, about kind of how do you like, how does one make a decision that's like, this is best for the team? And how does one kind of, again, like, weigh that with what if what's best for the team is like really bad for someone, like really bad. Right. Like we can talk about my experience on Molly Brown a little bit in a second. And I think that like where I have come to in my Frisbee career in terms of me and the way that I interact with Frisbee and the way that I interact with a team is like, we frequently look at individuals who create conflict as detrimental, right? Like we see someone who's loud and abrasive and aggressive, or who is argumentative or whatever, as detrimental to what's best for the team, right? And when you look at people who are like that or who express themselves like that, typically there's a reason. There's some reason. Like we're humans, right? Like I take a pretty big stance in terms of psychology on the like nurture side of things. Like you are who you are because of what's happened to you and because of like how you grew up and the people you've interacted with and all that stuff. And so like for me, when I am on the Frisbee field and I'm feeling some type of way or I'm reacting in some type of way, and I can see, you can always see that you're pissing someone off, right? Like you can almost always be like, that didn't hit right. or like that didn't, you know, like, ooh, that wasn't it. And also, like, I have been on a ton of really, really good teams. Really good teams. I won a world championship the same year Quinn did. I won a national championship last year. And so I'm like, is me being on your team detrimental? So much so that you can't, that you're like, I'm physically taking something away from you, because I also add a lot to a team. Kins adds so much to a team. Becky adds so much to a team. And when we look at people as detrimental, we're taking away all of the incredible things that they're contributing. And we're just looking. Never. We're limiting them to the things that we think they should be doing.
Our reactions and our actions towards the people that are seen as detrimental are more of like, hey, you need to fit in with this group, rather than, hey, we're supporting you in your natural reactions. And we act like making them fit in and forcing them to be someone they're not is going to fix the issue, as opposed to then just supporting them and being their friend and being their teammate in a way that will in the end be more positive than the way we react.
Totally.
And when I think about I think about you, Kins, I think about your passion, and I think about when you were on the college team, always bringing up the young guys, like really connecting with them, and just like how much you think about this and how it consumes you in a way that many players lack, and you kind of need to be that obsessed if you really want to be the team to be.
Well, I think once, no, I love, honestly, this is a good topic. I've been thinking about it a lot recently, and maybe it's just because of who I am, but like, even just yesterday driving home from practice, we were talking kind of about this, and like how there's just a very large spectrum of like what I bring and like people like myself bring. Like, there's a lot of positives, because like I describe myself as like easily excitable, and I think like I'm getting more like that's like a closer like I talk really loud, like those types of things, expressive. So a lot of things are just like coming out of my body, like in like I'm pretty, I don't know, I'm trying to like figure, I want like a good way to phrase that, but like I'm literally just producing like a lot of content for people to absorb, and there's a lot of there are a lot of really good things from that, but like everything is like kind of yin and yang, and so there's like probably a lot of, I mean, not probably, but there definitely are a lot of negatives, and who knows if like one outweighs the other or whatever, and just like how I make people feel. But like for me, it's always been important to like be aware of both like my positives and my negatives, so that like I can focus on, doing the things that I'm doing well and bringing that to a team, and also try to, I think the first step of like, improving yourself is just becoming aware of like what you are and are doing, because like sometimes you may not be able, like there's a lot of things that people have brought to my attention that I can't necessarily like change, or like if I wanted to be different, like I just like couldn't necessarily like do it. But there are a lot of things that I have improved on and I have worked on, and like in big part because of like all the like really good people that have helped me like become a better person, especially like once I came out to Colorado. And so I think that's like a really important thing for just anyone, but is just like being aware of these things, because that's also like, it made me think about it when we were talking about the conflict section of it, because a lot of the time, like I really enjoy when people, even though it's hard to hear sometimes, but like when people like bring things to my attention that made them feel not good, because like you said, Ari, like at the beginning, there's so many things that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis and like interactions that I'm having at a practice or at a tournament that like I honestly couldn't keep track. Like some, sure, they like stick in your mind more than others, but there's plenty of things that I do that I don't think twice about, and like could have really like impacted someone positively or negatively. And that's why it could be like positive feedback too. But also, I think, it's healthy to get a good dose of both of those things. But I resonated with what you said about like normally the people who
Totally.
I don't get along with, or not that I don't get along with, but I maybe don't interact as much with, or people who don't like me as much, are definitely people that are afraid of conflict. Because most of the time, if people come to me with their problems, like, even if I'm not as understanding, like immediately, like sometimes I'll be like listening and I'll be like, yeah, okay, for sure. Like I shouldn't have done that. And sometimes it takes me longer to like wrap my head around the idea that like I like hurt someone or did something. But like more often than not, like once that conflict like happens, like we're able to move on and like get up back on the same page, and it's really healthy. And there's a lot of times that I think people will just
Totally.
not say anything, and then
Yeah.
it's like the worst outcome, because then they're upset at something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm doing something that's upsetting them. Like they also think, like, a lot of the times, like,
Totally.
even if they know, if they
Totally.
just talk to me, they will know that like I either like just struggle at like controlling the thing that is making them upset, or like that's not like my intention. Because I think like understanding people's intention is like a big part of not like being
Context,
Totally.
yeah,
upset
intent,
at them.
yeah.
Because like, I mean, even like my roommate, and I, like, we'll go through like ebbs and flows of like our relationship, and a lot of it is just like getting back on the same page of like knowing where each other are coming from. And when we start to lose sight of like the fact that both of us are like generally like good humans that make mistakes and like actually like want the best for each other and like most other people, then we're able to, like, even if we're doing stuff that's pissing each other off, then we're able to reconnect.
Totally.
So that was a lot, but the
Yeah.
main points being awareness of one's strengths and
Totally.
weaknesses, and touching back on the importance of conflict and just confronting things that make you upset, because it's just like the only way I see is like a healthy resolution of the.
Mm-hmm.
And something on you, Kins, too.
Totally.
When you said that you're like producing a lot, it like I literally had like the most vivid image of you just like on the sideline, like angry, just like your arms flailing around, like you're probably kicking something or like scratching the dirt with your cleat, like you're just producing, like stuff's coming out of
Outlet,
your mouth,
yeah.
your arms, everything, right? And then something like that, people's reaction, like our teammates' reactions to that, a lot of time are like telling you to chill out, or like Kins, chill, like, or something like that, or and it's just like it's not helpful,
So
especially for you.
unhelpful.
And so what I have now started to do with you, I'm just like, yeah, I give you a high five and I'm like, we'll get him next time. And that seems to just like a little bit chill, like you still produce, but it's like
It's just like
we
a
get him next time, it's
natural
not a big deal.
flow.
Yeah, I'm just like, oh, high five, next time, like we'll get him, and then it's over. But other people are like, oh, like he's got to stop, like, oh, all
Yeah.
this, and it's just like
What's
it's
really
not
funny
helpful
is
for you.
we
It's
were
not
at a
helpful for
practice
me.
the other day, and it was like a pretty frustrating practice for a lot of people, and I wasn't playing, and one of our teammates got upset and kicked the trash can, and I was like, yo, like, dude, you gotta chill out, man. and everyone was like, kids, like, you can't
said
say
that.
that, dude. Like,
Holy
what are
shit.
you doing?
You're the one.
And it's so,
Dude,
I literally wrote
I
I
know,
would have.
because in my
Holy
mind,
shit.
I
I
was
would
like,
have
what do you mean? Like, he
exploded.
needs to chill out. Like, what the fuck is he doing? Like, you can't be walking around fucking kicking trash cans in practice. But yeah, it was pretty funny. Just a
Dude,
little
totally.
funny story.
Totally. Yeah. I have like a couple things to just respond to what you just said, Kins, if that's okay. Because I think it's like I just like you were talking and I was just like making all these connections in my head of like, oh, I want to talk about that.
Yeah,
I want to
That's
talk
what
about
we're
that. I
doing
want to talk
right
about that.
now.
So I'm
We're
just gonna get on my
doing that.
soapbox for a second. Okay, great. So I just kind of like want to reroute us in the fact that, right, like I mean, I could talk about whatever for however long with probably all three of you. But I just want to reroute us in the fact that like I'm really here to talk about something that I'm passionate about and like becoming an expert on, right, which is mental health. And I just like some of the things that you were pointing out, specifically the thing that you said where you were like, sometimes people tell me something and I just know that I can't change it. Right. And like I think coming back to an earlier question that you said, Mikey, which was like, what are some misconceptions about mental health? And I just like, I feel like I need to tattoo somewhere on my body. Like I can't change that I'm mentally ill, period. Because like on top of that, like people don't even know what that means.
Like even in the context
right?
of
And
a
so,
conversation that's
like,
specific to mental health, I'm not even 100% sure.
Totally. So here, I'll lead you through like some of the things that means for me. Okay, so one thing is like I have no control, no idea over the way that I am going to wake up in the morning. Some days I wake up and I'm like, great, coffee, homework, work. Some days I wake up and I'm like, if anybody fucking talks to me, I will explode on them. And I have no reason why. I have no idea why. And it's just the way my brain is working, right? Everything about mental health ties back to the brain. The brain is neurons, it's connections, it's chemicals. It's like something that is way out of our control. We don't even understand most of it. Some days I wake up and I am like, I physically cannot get out of bed. Not I will not, or I don't want to. It's I cannot get out of bed. And like that thing for people is so hard for them to latch onto, right? Because we, as humans, we love to make connections. We love to try and empathize with people. And people who have never felt that, they're like, yeah, sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to get out of bed. And I get out of bed anyways. So like, you're weak. Like, why can't you do that? Right. And for me, I'm like, no. Like, it's not a want. It's not a don't. It's a can't. And so much of like what I have tried to express to teammates in the past is like, so when you think about like someone who has intense trauma or intense anxiety, like what you learn in Psych 101 is like fight or flight, right? Your body goes into either extreme safety mode and you're like, it's a bear, right? If you see a bear, like, do you freeze or do you run? And like, people don't really have a conscious decision there. Your body just makes it, like your brain and your body make a decision to keep you safe. And when I'm playing sports, right, like what happens to us? Our heart rate raises, our stress levels go up, our like stress chemicals go up in our body, like we are dehydrated, right? It's so similar to fight or flight. It's so similar. And for me, my body sometimes cannot tell the difference. Like, how could it? It's been through so much stress, so much trauma. How could it physically be like, you're safe right now, when everything that's happening in my body is exactly the same? And so the way that I present in those moments is for sure self-preservation, right? Like, I will snap at you. If you say something to me that I don't like, I don't have the ability to be like, I'm safe, I'm okay. I will go on the attack. 100%. My voice will raise super high. I'll get really loud. I will cry. And like, it's not a choice, right? It's my body's natural reaction to what it thinks it needs to do based on past experiences. And yet, the number of times that people have been like, yo, can you chill? I'm like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? You want me to convince my body that has been through years and years of physical, sexual, emotional trauma that it's safe right now, when every inch of it is telling me that it's not? Like, what do you want me to do? You know? And like that idea of like, Kins, when you were like, sometimes I'm like, I can't change it. I'm like, God damn, true, right? And that's like, I think that is the biggest thing that Frisbee does to people with mental illnesses, is they tell them that they need to change things that they can't change because they don't know anything. They're not educated on it. They don't understand what it means. They don't understand what your body is actually doing. And so they're like, can you change for me? This is actually making me really uncomfortable.
Do you think it's unique to Frisbee, or
right?
is
And I'm like,
it sports and society interactions in general?
I have played Frisbee for so long, I don't know if I can answer that question. I mean, I think that Frisbee has this like really weird thing where our peers are our leaders and like make decisions for us. We talked about that a little bit, Mikey, right? And it's not always based on how just purely how good you are, right? Like we see in professional sports, like NFL quarterbacks beating up their wives and still playing on the field, right? Like we see like really bad stuff because in professional sports, all you care about is, can they make me money? Can they perform? Right. And in Frisbee, we're not quite there yet. Instead, our peers are just like, how do I feel about you? How do you make me feel when we interact? And like, if they get to a point where they're like, ooh, you make me so uncomfortable, like they have the power within Frisbee to be like,
it becomes,
go away.
For lack of a better word, cliquey or insular, or
I think that
there it is.
I think
that's
it
the word. That actually is the word. And it is kind of a harsh word, but probably true. So a lot of things come to mind because, again, like when we talked before, everything you say resonates with me, but then I have this conflicting side. I have this side that's like, oh, I kind of see from the team perspective. I understand, like, well, we can't have a team of people that are, like, how can a team function if nobody can interact with each other? But that's not what we're saying, right? Because there is an avenue to interact, and there's clearly an avenue to have success with people who are struggling with mental health. I guess the tough question that I'm getting at is like, what is, like, at what point do you consider, like, is the quote unquote team's best interest so misaligned with an individual? And is there an answer to that? There may not be.
Yeah, I mean, and anybody who has played Frisbee for long enough can think about like people who are, or just like people who are really good at Frisbee who have been so misaligned with the team that they've been asked to leave. Right? Like I can think of 3 names right now off the top of my head. And I just think that like I just think that we lack the ability, specifically in women's Frisbee, to really differentiate between like, is this a me problem? Like, is this a problem where like I'm uncomfortable with that and I need to just engage with it in order to understand it?
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I think it's not a black and white issue. It's like, well, you have to have a conversation with people. You have to coach. You have to interact.
Totally.
I had also written some stuff down trying to, if anybody has anything to say while I'm referencing here. I know. I sort of on the note of like, another sort of tough question, I think, is, Kins, I'm going to keep using you as my example, if you don't mind. If you don't mind.
I don't mind.
I sometimes I feel bad because I do forget to tell Kins how awesome he is, and we rag on him a lot. But like, so in competition in sport, when you're in a time crunch and high pressure, it's everybody's elevated, right? Emotionally and stress. What I often say this about language in general. In my opinion, language is an obtuse tool. Like we try to convey a lot of meaning with inaccurate words, and that's why context and intent matters. And also, like, coming from a family who, like, I only speak English, but most of my family speaks Cantonese or some similar dialect, and I cannot really interact with them conversationally. So, in a family setting, for instance, I have to infer a lot, and I can generally understand what somebody is trying to say, but they're like not saying the right words at all. So, like, in the heat of the moment, like for you, Kins, for instance, like maybe not even for you, for anybody, um, if I tell you to chill out, do you think you process that as like, I know what Mike means. He's not trying to tell me that I'm being an asshole, or do you think that it comes off as, I mean, I know there's some compromise, but what I'm getting at is like, is there, like, how do you develop this rapport between people? I think for the most part, I have that with both of you, Quinn and Kins. I think maybe we don't always, like, our tempers flare, etc. But I think we say things, definitely not PC quite often, but we understand what we mean. What do you? I said a lot there.
Kind of just like, how do you manage it, I guess, and like aim the like allotness that we've been
Yeah.
referencing in a positive direction, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose, like, do we, and since this is like an
Mhm.
ultimate podcast, like, do we have any recommendations to people, to teams that are dealing, and may not even be mental health, but like, how do you develop the culture that's efficient and also welcoming, non-discriminatory?
Mm. It's a really good question. So something that I have been talking a lot about in terms of my job and like what I do every day, right? So basically, school psychology is like a super niche profession. It's not a school counselor. It's like specifically my job in a nutshell is taking kids like me, or kids who have learning disabilities, or kids who are, have autism spectrum disorder or have severe ADHD, like kids who struggle to get through days of school without support. And I'm like, how do we take this kid and make school and education accessible for them? Right. And so school psych kind of came from the like laws that happened 40, 50, 60 years ago, where the government was like, we need to make sure that every kid has access to education. And people were like, okay. And there are people with disabilities who don't have access to education. So like, how do we mend that? Right. And so then school psychology was born. And so that's my job. And a lot of my job is looking at a kid who, like, take me for example, when I was 16, I was extremely volatile. I was self-destructive. There were like parts of my high school career where I was what's called eyes on, which means that like when I was within the school building, I always had to have an adult's eyes on me. So if I went to the bathroom, my teacher had to call someone, and someone had to escort me to the bathroom, stay with me, and then escort me back to class. And that was because I ran away from school. I self-harmed in school. Like by all means, hard kid. And
Right.
I still needed to get through high school. Right. And so when you look at a kid like me and you only look at the things that they can't do, like you're screwing up your relationship with that kid. Like you can't do that. You can't look at someone and be like, I'm just going to value the things that you can't do, that you can't control, that is hard for me to deal with. You have to look at the things that the kid can do and the things that the kid works to do hard and the things that the kid is good at, right? Like what it's called is looking at someone with a strength-based perspective, right? Look at them for their strength.
This is not really
Value
related
their
to what you're
strengths
saying, but
over
it
their
just makes me think of
weaknesses.
this book that I was read by my strength-based leadership is what I'm trying to show the camera.
Great book. Yeah. And I think about that so often in Frisbee because on almost every team I've played for, with the exception of one, which was Slow, which I played for when I was in college, I've always been looked at from a weakness-based perspective. It's always been, what can you not do? What are you doing that's hurting us? What are the things that you don't bring to the table? And it's never, it rarely has ever been, you're passionate about this sport. You show up to things, you train unlike most people on a team. I mean, Becky and I train an absurd amount. Like it's something that we can control as people, as we're like, we can control how much effort we put in outside of a team environment. And so we're going to nail that. Like we're going to check it off of every box, right? I bring glitter. And if you watch some of the Molly Brown Nationals games from last year, you can hear my voice on the sideline in every single point that I'm not on the field. Like I do things so well, and it's never about that. It's always about the things that I can't do. And when you do that, you immediately discriminate against people. Immediately, right? Like you think about people who have generational trauma, racial trauma, like they're going to do things, they're going to respond to things that make you uncomfortable. And if you focus on that, you're erasing the reasons that they're responding to it that way. Mm-hmm. And you're discriminating against them, 100%. And so when Quinn was talking about Becky, I was like, yeah, Quinn, the reason that Quinn and I are such good friends is because Quinn looks at things from a strengths-based perspective almost 100% of his life. Looks at his relationships like that, looks at his teammates like that, right? He loses games, like you all have been 0-3. I don't know if either of you know this, but I text Quinn after every single one of your games. And I'm like, hey, how was it? But, right, like he looks at losing as something that is a step to getting better. And that's why, like, Quinn and I don't agree on a lot of things. But like, we are very close friends because of that. And so many teams don't fucking do that.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, that was sick. It's a good segue. I kind of want to hear a little bit about your experience in the Boston Ultimate community, specifically on slow white probably, and then just mixed in general. I don't know a lot about mixed, and I'm sure, I don't know, Mikey probably knows a little bit more, but Kins probably doesn't. And I just like to kind of hear your experience in that mixed environment and then the Boston environment as well.
Yeah, so the beautiful thing about mixed, in my opinion, is that if you take this is actually pretty funny to say out loud, but if you take some of the things that on the women's field I bring that are seen as detrimental, like aggression, anger, not smiling.
Can I interject, by the way, because as somebody who
conflict.
Like sure. Apparently you don't smile a lot, but whenever I see you, you're like you like smile and you come and hug me, even before we like knew each other very well at all.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's definitely an in the moment.
Yeah, I know, I get it.
On the field situation. Anyways, when you look at all of those things, and then you look at men, they like align quite a bit, like the like masculine sports energy and those things. And the beautiful thing about mixed is that I'm on the field with men. So all of a sudden those things are not seen as a detriment because the men are doing it. So it's fine. Right? And like, that's one of the things. So now I'm playing mixed this year with a team that I actually have like come to love very quickly. And I like remembered why I played mixed for so long in college. Like I was in Boston. I could have tried out for Brute. I could have played women's, and I stayed with Slow for a long time. And I kind of remembered, like, oh yeah, the men help me feel so okay on this field, because like when they express themselves, they're expressing themselves the way that I express myself. And so, you know, like I'm on the field with like 5 kins, and I'm like, sick. Thank God it's not just me, you know? And so that's what I love. That's like on a personal level what I love about mixed. I also play, I mean, you all have seen me play. I play like pretty fast. I love throwing hucks. And I just like I love the style of mixed frisbee just a little bit more. And like I played a year of men's college when I was in college, my like 5th year, and that was that's the most fun I've ever had playing frisbee, was playing men's. Like I frequently am like to Quinn or Becky, I'm like, can I come to Bravo tryouts? Like I just like, it's like my style of frisbee. It's like a little bit less thinking and a little bit more just like fast action, like go get it. And so I really like mixed in that sense. And yeah, I loved playing for Slow. I loved playing for Slow. I really did. And I look back on it with like only fond memories. Minus getting last at nationals in 2019. That sucks. True. Yeah, but like I like Boston frisbee is really weird. I mean, if you like my time, wild card isn't really in the picture anymore. But like my time playing on Slow was like, let's see, like my first year we made semis, so it was 2017. That was the year after they won. And wild card didn't make it to nationals that year. My second year, or they did, I can't remember. But like my second year, you all remember Snake Country?
There's so many.
They were created, teams, right? So then there were like 3 high-level mixed teams. Yeah, like three mixed teams from Boston who all went to nationals that year. Wild. My third year on the team, it was the same. And then my 4th year, Snake Country dropped. Or no, I don't know. But then you know, like Sprocket popped up. And so it's just like, it's like a wild, it's like a, especially in the mixed division, it's just like a wild combination of really talented people. And it really, lot of talent. And it really just comes from, right, like in Boston, I went to Northeastern. Within a 2-mile radius of Northeastern was 11 different colleges.
So many different.
So it's just like,
to draw.
Right, like it's just like like so many schools with good frisbee programs. Brown, Harvard, UMass, right? Like all of these schools that have like been around the college nationals frisbee scene for a while. Northeastern, Tufts, all of those schools just feed into that club program, and most people go mixed.
You mentioned like you like the style of mixed more and like fitting in with the vibes that men bring. And you also mentioned like how frisbee's kind of soft. When we were texting before we jumped on the pod, one thing I mentioned is potentially like using the wrong vocabulary for sensitive topics, and actually what that makes me think of is how much fear I have sometimes, like, and was maybe an apprehension of doing this pod, like specific episode, and also starting the podcast at all, because I do fear conflict a lot of the time. And I know that I am not always completely PC, even though like I'm generally pretty soft spoken and whatever, but I am terrified that people will come at me for using incorrect language or you know, the non-acceptable frisbee, quote unquote frisbee words. I don't think I have a follow-up question about it, but it just came to mind.
Yeah. One thing that I will posit is typically the people that come at you with anger when you do something like that are also the people who don't put their money where their mouth is in terms of actually doing
Right.
hard
Like I
work and supporting
want
people
to
in their
be
life.
better. I'm happy to try,
So
but let me make a mistake is kind of where I'm coming from.
it's the people who look at mistakes
Right.
as, again, detriments, as like
Right.
fucking up rather than as being humans. But yeah, I have had moments in my life where I was like that, and then I've also, I would say, like, end of college, maybe when I was in college, like somebody would say something, use the wrong word or say something bad, and I would like immediately jump on them. And I think through my relationship with Quinn, actually, and like talking about the AUDL, through like just kind of like being here and seeing the way that some people interact with things that they don't agree with, I'm just like, I don't really want to do that. That's not how I want to interact with that. And so yeah, you'll rarely get something from me that's like attacking if you say something that I don't agree
that's
with.
why we were able to sit down together a couple weeks ago and just talk.
And I feel like a lot of it goes to the intent thing of, if
Totally.
like I thought Mikey was a shitty person, then when he slipped up and said something wrong, then I would be like, yeah, because Mikey's a shithead. But if I'm viewing everyone right, but if I'm viewing people as like humans who like for the most part have good intentions, or at least like consciously have good intentions, but who aren't perfect and make mistakes, and it's way easier to be forgiving and supportive, which is really can be just a challenge to like reframe. It's really easy to just be hateful, and it's way easier to be hateful and just like shit on people, like even when you were talking about like the strength things, but like truly, like people so often like will bond over just like shitting on like someone else,
Truly.
or like, and it's so easy.
That's like the most
And it's
common
so
way to
easy,
bond
and
with
it makes
people.
you feel good, because
Totally.
it kind of almost like puts you in a position that's like above them, because you're like, well, they're just like so bad at all these things. Yeah.
It's so,
and
it's
what's something
so
that's so refreshing
that.
that like
It's so
Saeed and I have been
that.
doing, I've noticed more recently, is like, because it's really easy to slip into the whole, like, especially after you're losing or whatever, just of like talking about like all the mistakes that people made, or like all the cons that people have in their game, or like that kind of stuff. And it's so refreshing. Like if I'm like talking about like, I don't know, anyone, and like if I'm like, oh, like you Quinn, dude, just like getting skied on like twice to end the game, like yeah, I had to be right. But if I'm like, God, Quinn, dude, just sucks. Like just don't stop getting beat deep. But then to like add like to bring into the conversation like positive things that Quinn does is so refreshing and feels so good.
Yeah.
I had to, Quinn. It was
Can we
the
think
first
of
one
one?
that came to my mind.
You think of one.
Totally.
No, but actually, it's such a refreshing thing to do, and I would advise people to add those to their conversation, and it's kind of like a nice like almost like pause when you feel the conversation slipping into like all these like negative trains of thought, to just be like, but also like, how like think about how good they are at this thing, and like how well they are, because it helps you like also you can lose sight of like the value that someone brings, and like a lot of the people on these teams, like I would say like something I like to do when I'm like talking about people, like assessing them, and be like, oh, like they're net positive or like they're net negative, right? They're like you try to like fact, and obviously that's like really hard, but most of the people are net positive, you know what I mean? Like most people, it's very hard to be net negative. Like you'd have to be like really fucking up a lot and like doing all sorts of wrong things, and so it's nice to reframe it, and you can balance out the fact that like, oh, look at all the good things that they're doing to like help this team, and it's really nice.
We just had Bravo tryouts a couple weeks ago, and post tryouts, people ask for feedback a lot, and I do get caught like because I want to tell them things that they can do better, but also like generally you're still net positive, but there's just a lot of fucking good players to choose from, and it makes it difficult, and then I don't want to spend a bunch of time, well, you could do this better and that better. Sometimes it's just like there just wasn't a spot. There just wasn't a role, but you're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing, and you still may never make it, which is like not a really helpful thing to tell
Speaking
somebody.
of, like
So
you said
hard.
earlier, Ari, like peers making decisions, like
So hard.
I especially think about that with like tryouts and stuff, you know, because like I was
Yeah.
talking to Quinn about this at Bravo tryouts, but I was like, if we ran an experiment where okay, you held a normal tryouts and that was like I'm not like I've never done like a research lab, so I might get this wrong. But maybe that's like your control group, right? And that's like the normal tryout that you would run every year. And then the other group, you bring the same people back, but like you know the thing in Men in Black where you like get rid of people's memory, okay? So
The
you just like
neuralizer.
boop, and so like all the captains, all the coaches, like you just boop, they don't know who anyone is, and you run the tryouts. Like how different would the teams be? That's what I was trying to say. I think it would be so
Oh, it
different
would be
if we didn't
so
know
different. It would
anyone.
be so different.
Yeah.
It would be
Yeah.
so different. If you didn't know people, it would be so different. I mean, that's also just like when you think about like that's such a good question and like a weird like I would love to like get stoned and just like really like dive deep into that to be like what do you think would happen, you know? But I just like that's also like Mikey, you and I talked a little bit about how like it's one of my least favorite things about Frisbee is that like my friends can be my captains, can make decisions for me, can define how much I can contribute to a team, can define what they think my strengths and weaknesses are. It's my least favorite thing. It's so hard for me. It's so hard for me, especially because a lot of the time, the way that we define people doesn't actually have much to do with how good at Frisbee they are. Right. And so like if you like wiped people's brains and you were like, here's I don't know, how many people do you have at tryouts?
Sure.
60?
That range,
80?
yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And like, you know, Saeed has a bad tryout.
Yeah, and I'm also just thinking of
What
some
happened?
people who may
You
have
know?
not been putting their best foot forward, knowing that they didn't have to at tryouts. There are other factors too, like we had an AUDL game.
Yeah, Nut, I'm sure did not try very hard at tryouts. I will absolutely go on blast for that.
Nut is actually one of the funny ones of like where if you like do that experiment, you're like,
You actually got a couple blocks, I'll say.
but it's just like like Nut would be like one of those like guys who like if you didn't know anything about Ultimate and you were just making these teams, like I don't know. I mean, I would say what's going for him is he's such a charismatic presence that I think if Nut showed up at a tryout, you would just talk his way into it, right?
Just talk
Like,
his way on.
if he had enough time to get up, yeah.
Totally, 100%, 100%. Also, like, totally. Also, let's not limit that like Nut is one of the best standstill power throwers ever, right? Like Nut throws like
right. The biggest thing that would go against Nut is like when he shows up, he doesn't look the part, you know? Like if you didn't know, you're just like this guy. Like it's like some like you know
not.
like
If
whatever,
you didn't know,
you don't think. So it is a fun exercise, but I also think it's in some ways it can be like a helpful exercise just to try to remove as many biases as you can when picking the teams. And it's also why I think like it's nice that, you know, like TK, although like his takes can be frustrating because they can be so different. It is really healthy because like if we just had a bunch of like bird guys picking all these teams, like the amount of bird bias and that kind of stuff would be insane. And so like having some like CSU like you know like borderline like spiteful of bird like but
well he did help coach the team this year,
obviously. So now is it all ruined potentially because TK is all coach bird, but it's really nice. And also I think that just speaks to the importance of like diversity in like people in like a decision making group, you know, because like and it's way more challenging. Like that's the thing. It's way easier if it was just a bunch of bird guys because we'd be like, yeah, like easy. I agree with you. Let's just take all these bird people. And it's way harder when like you have to actually like talk through different opinions and those kind of things. But I think it's just so important in any like decision making group, whether it's ultimate or anything else, to have that kind of diversity.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Different perspectives. This something came to mind randomly, and I can't remember what book this was, but there's this idea of, I think it was like a Nintendo executive, and his job was purely to rock the boat, kind of sort of play devil's advocate and throw just crazy ideas out there just to move the needle in a certain direction, and so like it kind of recalibrates everybody. Although I will say that the absolute, in my opinion, worst case scenario of this is probably like Donald Trump in recent history. Like he, was so out there crazy in a way
Yeah.
that it calibrated people's sense of what
Yeah.
is okay in
Yeah.
a negative way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, also like, again, bringing it back to kind of like
Yeah, center
what we're
us.
talking about. It like we get, yeah, I would love to shoot the shit with you all for a long time, and like bringing it back to kind of like creating spaces where diverse people can access frisbee, right? Whether that be racially diverse, religiously diverse, neurodivergent, like any group that's out of the majority of frisbee players. And we have our peers who are like making decisions for us, right? Making decisions about teams. And we have these like sounding boards, like Kins was saying, where like everyone just thinks the same. You've been on the team for 10 years. The same group of friends has been in power for 8 of those 10 years, right? And it's just like a cycle. Like everybody thinks the same. And what ends up happening is like I took a really interesting human nature class in undergrad that was like just like if we look historically at how large groups of people have interacted with things, like what happens, right? And if you are in this like small circular secular group where like you're all thinking and talking the same way, and you have been doing that for a long time, you start pardoning each other in ways that like you wouldn't pardon other people, right? Like you start giving people passes because you're like, this is safe for me. We all think the same. I don't want to rock the boat.
Right.
By saying, no, I actually disagree with that. And so you give people pardons. And then outside of that group, other people don't get the same pardons. And when we do that on frisbee teams, again, you get discrimination. Like you get teams who are like, like I actually think Bravo has since I've been here, so in the last 2 years, and like has done a pretty good job in terms of like bringing in other groups. Like, yeah, your team is majority bird for sure, and like bird is a very good team, so it makes sense. And like you've trickled in people from elsewhere, and like I see other teams that are just so have such groupthink that like you can tell who's not in the it group. Like you can tell just from interacting with that team who is not comfortable, who doesn't feel like they have a say at the table. And it
makes me wonder like how often I'm guilty of some of this. Like how often do I give both of these guys a pass when it doesn't make sense to, or vice versa, or in any other scenario? Like I'm absolutely 100% positive it happens where I'm giving somebody a pass for doing something shitty that they shouldn't have done.
Yeah. I mean, again, so much of human nature is self-preservation, right? Like, how do I keep myself safe? How do I keep myself comfortable? And so when you've been in a group of people who all thinks and acts and talks about things the same way for 10 years, and you're like, or however many years, right? You've like created this identity surrounding that group. Like subconsciously or consciously,
Because if
you
you
don't
rock the
want
boat, it's
to
like
rock the
off
boat
with your
because
head.
you're like
But
self-preservation.
luckily, no
100%,
one.
yeah.
But that's why it's important to
Exactly.
rock. I mean,
Exactly.
I guess right.
It
Yeah,
is,
and
yeah,
because
yeah.
even with those passes,
That's why it's
like as
important to
long
rock the
as
boat.
it
Totally.
kind of goes back to just like the confronting
Totally.
people that we talked about. Like it, you can. It's not like you have to chop their head off, but you should confront them about something that like you think, if you feel that like what they did wasn't right or whatever, like you should confront them. And then like vice versa, like you shouldn't be off with their heading like random people who you don't know that like do something.
Off with their heading.
Yeah,
But
can
it's
we
like
coin
honestly,
that?
like if you think about like all the problem, like so
Coin,
many of the
pod
problems,
practice,
just like
action,
and it's like this balance of like self-preservation and also what we're talking about. Because if you look at all like the problems of like conflict, just like in the world, like it's like that balance that is being struggled with of like, okay, well, we need to self-preserve as a group and like thrive and meet everyone's necessities. And part of that is like protecting from like other groups. And so like those are outsiders that you can't get along with. But then part of it is like be so much if we could all like come together and, you know, realize that we have these similarities as humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. I want to maybe hit a few more topics before we let you go. Actually, before we move on, though, speaking
Yeah.
about the tryout things and diversity and different backgrounds, even though he did go to CU, someone that is near and dear to all of our hearts, I'm pumped that we got Ty Win correct. Ty, trash teammate of yours, Ari, and a Summit player as well. Insane athlete, defender, incredible human being. He went to CU, but only played on the B team. So like none of us really had that much exposure to him at CU. So I'll give ourselves just a little pat on the back for
But
finding
kind of
Ty.
like but kind of like TK, right? Because like I feel like I was like, oh, I don't know.
I'll give myself a pat on the back too. Both TK and I were
Nice.
high on him.
Yeah. Dude, I get to throw deep to him. He and I are on the same D line this year.
Okay,
So
the topics
so
that
sick.
I would love to hit are Spirit of the Game. I know you have some thoughts on Spirit of the Game. Maybe if you wanted to plug a little bit, I don't even know if it's still active, but your program, is that the organization time for the Ultimate Talk?
Yeah.
And potentially some more Molly Brown stuff if you're down to, if we haven't hit on anything specifically.
One question I had that you talked about, like the strength-based mindset, like as a way of allowing different people to exist in a team environment. Like, do you have any other thoughts that you think are helpful for allowing for different types of people on a team? Yeah. And like, what are they? Like, you know, that way people listening could like try to utilize them on their teams, and whether it's like an ultimate team or like at work or whatever it may be. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Let's do that last.
You may have touched a little bit on it with what you're talking about in your profession, school.
Yeah.
Let's go with Spirit of the Game. Remind me what your thoughts are, and I think that I was very much aligned, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So I actually my thoughts on Spirit of the Game, and also my maybe some of my experience on being a part of the Molly Brown community kind of goes maybe a little bit together. Specifically with Spirit of the Game, I think that it's used to police people. And I think that it's used like
it's almost like a
the comfort
propaganda.
Of the privilege. Truly. Yes. And like So, and
Okay.
also all
Okay.
of these things kind of go together. So I'm just gonna hit them. But when Kins comes back, I would love to ask him about what he thought about Time for the Ultimate Talk, because we did teach-in with
One of
Mama
those
Bird
years.
when Kins was a freshman and sophomore.
Do you know what we're talking about, Ken?
Yeah.
Yes, I
Perfect.
can remember because it was like
And
it was like the like it was like a
yeah.
I thought it was like a gender equity talk maybe. I don't have a lot of memories
it
of the
wasn't.
specific event.
So we put Kins in a pickle because he was
Okay,
running to the
whatever.
bathroom.
Anyways, yeah. Perfect. Basically, when one of the like biggest reckonings that I had within the frisbee community was when I was in college. I decided. So COVID hit the like halfway through my fourth year of college, and then in between my fourth and fifth year, I decided to leave the women's team at Northeastern and play for the men's team. There are a lot of reasons that I decided to do that. And kind of like coinciding with that, I recognized and realized and was unfortunately like met face to face with the fact that like it was really the first time that I was like, damn, the frisbee community really has no idea how to interact with mental health and the mentally ill population. And so I co-founded this organization called Time for the Ultimate Talk. My best friend in the entire world, she and I met virtually. We didn't meet in person for the first year and a half of our relationship. Literally cannot imagine my life without her right now. But we put on these teach-ins for college teams. That was like, how do you do this? How do you do this? Because like statistically, 5 to 7 people on your team are struggling with mental health at any given time. And within those 5 to 7 people, 1 to 2 of them are like me, who struggle with it day in, day out, like their life is permanently impacted. And so we were like, we can't not talk about this, right? Like, and no one's talking about it, so we're going to talk about it. And so we did these teach-ins, and one of the things that we did was we would ask teams, we would send out these forms before our teach-in so that we could like gather information on, how does the team run? What are the team values? And one of the things that we asked people is, what are your 3 favorite things? What are 3 things what are 3 words that you would use to describe your favorite teammate? That's what we asked people. And what we got was like overwhelmingly positive, spirited, reliable, centered, stuff like that. Stuff like that. And one of the things that we did during the teach-in was we would put the words up on the screen, right? It was all on Zoom. This was during COVID. We would put the words up on the screen, and then we would highlight the words that are used against people with mental illnesses, right? Like the number of times that someone has been like, you're not being positive right now to me, or like your mood is a little like volatile. Like I am not reliable. I can't be reliable. I don't know how I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning, right? Like it's not possible for me to be a reliable human being. And we were like, if you uphold these, right? Like if this is what you push as like the way to be a good teammate, you're erasing this entire population. And you're basically putting them in a box of like, you can never be a good teammate for me because this is what I need to be a good teammate. And you can't do that. So you're a bad teammate. And I think spirit of the game is so similar. I think it's like, these are the things that we want people to do. We want people to be able to talk through their emotions on the field and figure out a call. We want people to make good decisions with their body and the way that they interact with teammates. And we want people, like if you think about spirit of the game, it's like, what are we asking people to do? And in turn, who is that then erasing? Like, okay, you're asking me, again, we come back to this like body thing with me, right? You're asking me to tell my body that it's safe when it's literally firing on every cylinder that it's not. so much so that I can then calm down and lower my voice when I disagree with something on the field. And if I don't do that, I'm not spirited. And then, right. And then that one interaction, then we like give a team a paper and we're like, here, vote, like, tell us how spirited you think this team is. And whatever one interaction I had where I maybe exploded and someone was like, whoa, right? Then like for calls or whatever, we get docked a point because of that one interaction. And I'm like, dude, what are you like? This is bullshit. This is bullshit. We're policing people to be able to do things that white people can do, that neurotypical people can do, and that people who slept well can do. Like, I'm like, you're hungry on the field. You don't interact well. Like, it's just so
one of the
so stupid.
Like
it's so
the
stupid.
heart of it, I more or less agree with. Like I think, but one thing that I really there's two things I really don't like about it. One, we don't teach people how to have these interactions. We like, this is what SOTG is, but we're not going to give you any tools on how to do this or like real expectations on knowing the difference between like adhering to the rules as spirit versus like, yeah, good. Like you get like, I'll give you that one sort of thing. And the other thing I don't like about it is I think it's like we hold it onto it as this real sense of pride, as if it makes the sport super unique and it makes us unwilling to change. And sort of like a tangent in the AUDL, we have referees, but we also have integrity calls. And initially I thought like, this is great. Like it maintains this piece of ultimate that's super good and whatever. But what I found that the integrity call does not mix well with refereeing, because you're like expecting these referees to be like, what, like, I don't like, what's kind of like, what even is the point of the referee? And then you just get really fucking pissed at the people when they don't act in what you would think is spirited, or to the letter of the law. Even like if they foul you, then you become like, what the fuck? But like, it's competition. Like there's all these other factors. And in my mind, I think they should just separate the two. It's like, if you're going to be self-officiation, do it, which is not totally SOTG. And if you're going to have referees, just have referees and live with the fact that they're not very good and consistent yet. That was a bit of a tangent, so I'll try to go back to
Quinn. I want to add to the tangent.
Yeah.
Just off what Ari was saying, just of like, if you don't do something that is spirit of the game, quote unquote, that all that stuff that they mentioned happens, and then all the little Reddit gremlins clip it and post it, and then all of a sudden you're labeled as this player that is unspirited and not a good person, and all of this shit on top of already that stuff happening in the game, and then it's everywhere and everybody hates you all of a sudden because you had this one little thing.
Dude, this happened to me a little different, just kind of like adding on to that. Something that Becky says constantly is like, you expect me to do what when my heart rate is that high? Right? Like, sorry, you expect me to what? And like, I love that. I like took that as soon as you said it. I was like, I'm gonna pocket that one for a rainy day. But something that happened to me recently is, and like, I'm sure each and every one of us has done this, because if you play Frisbee and you haven't had a bad bid, then you're not trying, right? I had a bad bid in the finals of nationals. Front cone, like, wasn't looking over my shoulder, was facing the sideline, missed the upline cut, just saw the throw, made a bid on it. Like, player was fine. everyone was fine, right? And I like didn't even register it in my head as like, oh, that was a bad bid. And then like 2 weeks later, I watched the game back and I was like, whoa, I should not have done that. Yeah, front cone bids are never, in my opinion, are tough. Those are tough. Those are tough to do safely. And I reached out to the player and I was like, dude, I'm so like that. I just watched that game and like that bid was bad. Like that wasn't my space and I'm really sorry about that. And like we had a great interaction about it and totally fine. And Reddit and Twitter took that clip and all of a sudden I'm an unspirited, unsafe player. And I was like, dude, I'm positive that either each and every one of you who's posting this right now has either never been in a championship game trying to win a championship, or two,
No, that
only
stuff
played
is so
summer
bad.
league.
That stuff is
Like,
like
Reddit
the
gremlins.
worst
why
to
are we
look
only
at.
exactly?
Honestly.
But but it's just like it's this
Don't
thing
do it,
within.
Ari.
I mean, it's the only time
Don't
I've
do
ever
it.
been on
Don't
Reddit
go on it.
was someone was like, dude,
Yeah, and I don't think this
I
is unique to
never
Frisbee. I think
returning.
people are generally like,
You know what I
oh,
mean? But it's
I get
No,
to
that is.
judge you.
I don't think
need
a lot
to
of the
do
things
that.
is unique
Totally.
to Frisbee.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that spirit of the game is a part of that, right? Like I think that it's a part of it. Like I think it's like this idea that like we can judge someone's decisions and the way someone reacts to something. Yeah. And like we get to define even like numerically, like what is it at nationals? We rate people from like a 1 to 5 or something like that on like, I'm like, we get to decide what? Like, why does it like, why has spirit become this thing that like empowers people who are majority white, neurotypical, cisgender to like define how other people react to things? Like, why is that how we have like made this sport to be? It drives me up a wall. I don't engage in the spirit conversation. Yeah. Like when a spirit captain is like, we're gonna rank like time for us
also
to do
like for when it would be like its most beautiful
I'm gonna
state,
sit this one out.
like it would be at a point where it's understanding that like a spirit to each person. There's no way you could define spirit for one person and have it be unanimous across all teams.
Mean something different.
All the division. So it would be this like incredibly fluid thing that like
100%.
Because that's the problem with like so many things in life where you're trying to like nail it down and like get like really like put it into words and like figure out what it is. And like it's a nice like kind of like with those one-liners we talked about with Grant, and like you just want something there. And it's really just so much more abstract than that and so much more complicated than that. And trying to classify it into like my spirit is so difficult.
Having the full picture is so important, and understanding context and intention and the people involved.
And that's really like, I mean, that's like a very spirited thing, especially like the not judging and based off of like one, instance like that is very spirited. Well, so there is a lot that goes into it. And I think there is so much beauty in that. Like, it's just that it's like you can twist anything and make it, there's pros and cons to it of how it affects people, but there are so many, like there are a lot of benefits to like what I think they're trying to do with like self-officiating and spirit of the game. But with like anything, like, there are also a lot of cons that come from it.
Cool. So maybe we end with Kins's question of center around what we can do to help people in Kins. Maybe you can ask the question again, and maybe we can even tie that into your Molly Brown experience a little bit, and like as much as you would like to, in terms of if people are in that situation, like what can we do to empower that person / find avenues of success.
Yeah, and I think that would make sense, because then like Ari could just use examples that like like that, like things that made you feel good or welcomed, or things that didn't make you feel good and feel welcomed. One funny thing I just wanted to say, Ari, was that I just like how when you get
for sure
excited about something, you start talking really loud and like almost like yelling at me. And and it's so relatable.
Dude.
It's
you,
so
Case, man.
relatable. And like,
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that because I think it's really
Yeah.
funny.
You know,
Sick.
another person that's like
Thank you.
that I've
Cheers.
had to send apologies to, Joe Smash. Like we've had like a lot of conversations on the phone, and then afterwards I'll either call him back or text him and be like, "Dude, I'm sorry. Like I know you were not upset. We just
No, and
talked
Mikey, yeah,
differently.
you're
We can
someone who like Buck and I have been talking about it. Is like, like it was like even when we were at your house talking after we did the Nut podcast, and we were talking about something.
Yeah, and I thought that you were being like confrontational
I just get really
or something.
I go back to the like easily excited thing, and I just think it's really funny. And it's fun to meet another yeller,
no doubt.
yell talker, it's excitable person.
It's refreshing. Yeah, totally. Totally. So yeah, I guess like, you know, like every team that has ever existed, like some teams really work for some people, some teams really don't work for some people, and it's not to say that the people who it does work for are shitty or are mean or are bad people, right? Like that's not, I don't think that that's like, I don't think that, again, like when we start like defining people based on what we think they should be, I think that that's where we really fall down a rabbit hole as like individuals, as people. Unless they like do something really fucked up, and then you can be like, okay. But I think like a lot of the things that we've been talking about, a lot of the things like coming at things from a strengths-based perspective, pushing yourself into the discomfort of interacting with conflict. Like interact with it, try and understand it, try and figure out like what is this person experiencing right now that is then creating this situation. And also something that like we didn't really touch on specifically, but that's important to recognize when you're on a team with someone who struggles with mental health and mental illness and trauma, is like, without a doubt, that person's experience of life is harder than yours. In some, you know, not like it's really hard to say like fully, but in some realms, for sure, 100%. I can say with full confidence that my experience of going to practice is harder than Quinn's. With full confidence, right? And like understanding that and centering that, right? Centering that instead of centering your own discomfort. Those are all things that did not happen for me on Molly Brown. And the last 3 months have been probably some of the hardest of my life. Like recognizing that and coming to terms with that. That like
is it useful to give a little more background, or should we just keep going?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So I was on the roster for Molly Brown for the last 3 years, won a championship. This year was asked to take a year off because people on the team were uncomfortable being my teammate. And, you know, didn't really get any feedback during the season about any of that. So was like super blindsided by it. And also, right, like, one of the most impactful conversations I've had in my entire life was the first time that Lisa came over for dinner after this happened, right? Like Lisa was in the conversation about that and was against, and like at no point put her foot down and was like, we're not going to do this. Like, we're not going to fucking do this, right? Like she didn't do that. And so like, there's been some rebuilding that has happened in our relationship where she has understood me better and I've understood her better. And there's been like a, you know, like a real connection there. And
silver lining.
One of the things, what? Silver, 100%. And one of the things that came out of that conversation was, we were sitting at a table, like smoking a joint, and I just looked at her and I was like, my entire life, every single day, I fight for my life in some way or another, right? Every day. When I was in undergrad and was learning about mental illnesses, in one of my classes, I remember so vividly, in one of my classes, my professor put up statistics on the screen and was like, what is the likelihood that someone gets institutionalized when they have X diagnoses, gets blah, blah, blah. And it literally, like, there was a number on the screen that was like, basically said that the likelihood that I commit suicide before the age of 21 is like above 80%. And I was like, holy fuck. I remember that. I remember sitting in that class so vividly, right? And like that fact is true. Like my life has taken so many different directions because I, in some way, some days more than others, but in some way, every day, I have to lift myself up, right? Like I have to find that inner strength to be like, nope, we're going to keep moving. And some days that's simply just being like, I'm not getting out of bed, but I'm going to ask my partner, Becky, who I live with now, to get me lunch, right? Like every day. And so much of that is me being like, these are the things that I cannot control. These are the things that I can't control. And these are the things that I work so hard to control and to do well, right? Me being able to play Frisbee, incredible, incredible that I played for a US national team. Incredible, unbelievable that I was able to do that, right? Incredible that I'm able to go through a graduate program. Incredible. And what Molly Brown did in that instance was they were like, all of the things that you try and do and that you're good at, we don't care about those things. We only care about the things that you cannot control. Right? And that was when Lisa was like, holy shit, that's fucked up. Like that was the first connection that Lisa and I had.
Yeah, I keep thinking about, the perspective of just not realizing what you're like. If you need to stay in bed when you wake up, my first reaction will probably not be like, Ari's doing what's best for them to function tomorrow or later today, versus like what I'm probably thinking is, what's your deal, Ari? Like, why are you being so lazy? And it's
totally 100%
a lack of understanding.
It's a lack of understanding, and it's an uplifting of one person's experience on a team over somebody else's, right? And that's why I wanted to come on this podcast, was because I was like, this happens way more than people realize. Way more. Teams do this way more. The amount of people who something similar has happened to them on other teams who are like me, insurmountable. And those are some of my closest friends, honestly.
Do you have any good suggestions on how to interact and how to bridge the gap a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is like, as a community, we need to move away from the narrative that conflict is bad. We have to. And not because conflict isn't fun for anyone, right? But going back to something that I said earlier, which is like, I live in constant conflict, right? Either with myself or with, mostly with myself, right? So conflict for me is not uncomfortable. I'm comfortable in conflict. I love sitting down with someone and being practice. Like, let's get into it. I love it because I'm like, we're connecting. Yes. And the people who are uncomfortable with conflict are the people who haven't been forced to be in it, right? The people who haven't had to have hard conversations throughout their life, who haven't lived in constant discomfort in their heads, right? It's the privileged people who are uncomfortable with conflict. Quinn.
Yes, exactly.
Quinn. And Quinn, correct me if I'm wrong though, Quinn. Like you and I have I've pushed you a little bit.
And
yeah.
Like just made me realize
but
like
you know what I mean? And so like
in general, my privilege in certain situations. Like we'll talk about people that we both have had relationships with, and I'll be like, "Oh yeah,
I love this.
That person's great. I have a great relationship with that person. I love that person." You're like, "Well, yeah, it's because you're a white male that they respect," and it's like, "Oh,
a white
shit, yeah." I guess that is why. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Cool. It's just like it made me realize things about myself and situations about myself that are a little bit way easier, you know.
Totally. Yeah. And so the one thing that like so I would not be playing frisbee this year if Mile High Trash did not exist. I would have signed off for the year. And the reason that I decided to play is because Alicia and Bert, Alicia Dixon, Bert Cherry, and Charles, I'm forgetting his last name right now. And Sam Hoteling, Becky's brother, and I'm sure other people were in there, right? They sat around a table during COVID or before COVID, and they were like, "We're gonna make a team that doesn't do this." And they literally made a contract, a player contract that you have to sign on to that outlines how the team deals with conflict, what the leadership's jobs are, and more importantly, what jobs are not leadership, right? Like leadership should not be dealing with interpersonal conflict. Should not happen. And the only reason that does happen is when people are afraid to deal with the conflict for themselves. And so they're like, I'm gonna go dump this on the captain. Right? And so like they literally outlined how to do the things that most teams cannot do and don't do. And I was like, fuck yes, I will play for you. Absolutely, I will play for you. And not only will I play for you, but like I am so excited to play for that team. The team is called Trash because the whole idea is that when you're on the team, you accept that you are a trash human being and you're going to fuck up and that's okay. And that's why the team is called Trash. And I'm like, yes, I want to do that, right? Like we have our first tournament this weekend and I literally made myself a cutoff that says mentally ill trash human with an arrow pointing up. And I will be wearing it all weekend. Right? So I guess, like lean into conflict as a team and be okay with the fact that conflict is going to happen because conflict is going to happen. And when you don't engage with it, you're erasing the people who need the conflict to happen in order for them to be understood.
That's good stuff. I have one question as like someone who embraces the conflict a lot and sometimes struggles with like the line of like, is this something that I should be working on and trying to do better at, or is this something that like the other people are being unreasonable and like basically, you know, like trying to figure that balance out? Because like I said, like I have matured a lot and like changed in a lot of ways. In a lot of like, it's, you know, in the same way that you can say someone has changed, like people can change and people can't change, right? Both are true. Like that's just like kind of what you were talking about, Mikey, with like words and not having exact meanings. Like people can change and they also can't change. Like some of the things about me are stagnant and won't, like, don't think I can change, and other things like I can definitely improve on. And so trying to figure out like if it's something that I should be working on and can control, like do you like what basically experiences have you had with that and being like, well, this is something, like realizing that something is a part of you and that, you know, other people may just have to accept, and realizing that, well, maybe this is actually something that I really need to work on because, you know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just taken a lot of practice. It's taken a lot of practice. It's taken a lot of therapy. It's taken a lot of educating myself on like what does it actually mean to have PTSD. Hello? Do you have something to say? Yeah, my dog is. Hey. What does it actually mean to have PTSD? What does it mean? how does my body react to that? How does my brain react to that? How is that going to affect my relationships? What is it? And in turn, right? Like, I think I still struggle with that. I think part of the reason why I struggled so much and still struggle every day with my experience on Molly Brown is that I still internalize so much of it. Of like, this is a me problem. I sucked up. It was me, right? And it just takes so much practice to be able to have the education, the knowledge, the self-awareness, and the ability to be like, this is me or this isn't me. And I think it's just like a lifelong journey. Like, I don't really know. I don't really know if there's ever going to be a time where I'm like, I can confidently say
Totally.
in the moment of conflict that this is my fault or your fault.
It's kind of a good stopping point, because I think, both can be true, right? Like, if you know it's something, if you've reflected on it, I think a big lesson from this pod is the importance of self-reflection therapy, not even just self-reflection, but helping, like seeking out help or getting help. Like maybe being skeptical of norms in a way. Like I try to tell people to like, don't do things because that's the way they've always been done. Yeah.
But you won't wear the patch after.
Well, I'm not a player, so I think you should wear the patch for like, if you go on a 14 or something. Like, anyway. But like there are instances, if Kins, for instance, like there are things that maybe you can improve it's even that word is subjective, because like what is the end goal, like what is the model that you're trying to adhere to, but maybe like it's something that you can change, and maybe in Ari it's not something that they can change. But on the flip side, like if it's me interacting with you, I can also, like over the years we've been able to interact better. I think so. because we just get to know each other better, and whether I want to or not, we have had plenty of conflict, and whether or not you either. But I think all the conflict that we've had over the years, I mean, the fact that we're so close can only mean that it's been a bonding component of our relationship.
Yeah. I mean, one of my favorite things to say to people after you like really get into them with it is, I'm like, yo, the closest people in my life are the ones who have sat in the shit with me.
In the trash.
Yeah, so be gentle with everyone, including yourself. That's gonna be a big takeaway from the pod. Thanks,
Sagekins.
While also being skeptical of things.
Yeah,
I think that's a good combination that you said, Mikey. Just gentle with people, but while also questioning. Like, just being gentle doesn't mean you have to accept what's going on. That's cool.
Cool. Any closing thoughts? Anything for Ari? Ari, you have anything for us? Sweet. Well,
nada.
This was a long time coming.
I'm
glad that we did it. It's been super fun getting to know you the last few weeks too, or last couple of months, as you've lived a little bit closer to me. So, I'll see you at the home gym. All right. Peace out, everybody.
Be seeing you.